Imagine this. A little girl, no older than 12, walks into a police station with fear in her eyes. She's nervous, clutching the straps of her backpack tightly. She needs help, but instead of being taken seriously, a police officer bursts into laughter at her words. Why? Because she tells him that her mom is in the special forces. The officer thinks it's a joke, something to laugh at, something unbelievable. But what happens next will flip the entire situation upside down. Because this little girl isn't lying, and her mom isn't just any soldier. She's one of the most highly trained warriors in the country. And when she walks through those station doors, the officer who laughed will instantly regret it. The fluorescent lights of the police station flickered as Alyssa, a 12-year-old girl with bright eyes and braided hair, stood awkwardly at the front desk. She wore her pink hoodie a little too big for her frame and a gray backpack that looked almost as heavy as she did. Her small hands clutched the straps tightly as she gathered the courage to speak. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly to the officer sitting in a chair, scrolling through his phone. "I need to report something. My mom, she's in the special forces. She told me if anything ever happened, I should come here." The officer, a burly man with a flushed face, looked up in surprise. For a moment, he simply blinked. Then, out of nowhere, he erupted into loud laughter. He leaned back in his chair, clutching his stomach, laughing so hard that a few other officers in the room turned their heads to see what was going on. "Special forces?" he chuckled, shaking his head. "Kid, do you know what that even means? That's not something your mom just tells you before bedtime. What is she? Some kind of superhero, too?" The laughter stung Alyssa like a slap across the face. She felt her cheeks burn, but she stood her ground. Her mom had taught her better than to back down, even when people didn't believe her. "I'm not lying," Alyssa said firmly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on the officers. "My mom is in the special forces. She's trained, she's tough, and she said if I was ever in trouble, I could come here and someone would help me." But instead of offering help, the officer smirked and leaned closer, clearly enjoying himself. "And what kind of trouble are you in, little soldier? Did someone take your lunch money?" he teased. Behind him, a couple of officers snickered quietly, though some exchanged uneasy looks. Something about the girl's determination didn't feel like a joke at all. Alyssa's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to scream, to demand respect, but instead, she repeated her words with quiet strength. "My mom's in the special forces, and she's coming." The room fell silent for a moment. The officer stopped laughing, caught off guard by the girl's certainty. There was no hesitation in her tone, no sign of make-believe, just truth. And almost as if on cue, the station door creaked open. The heavy glass doors of the police station swung open with a sharp whoosh. The sound echoed through the quiet room, pulling every pair of eyes toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway was a woman in camouflage fatigues, her posture tall and commanding. Across her chest was a vest marked with bold black letters, Special Forces. Her boots struck the tiled floor with authority as she walked inside, scanning the room with sharp, calculated eyes. There was no hesitation in her step, no uncertainty in her face. She carried herself like someone who had faced danger countless times before, and won. Alyssa's face instantly lit up. "Mom," she called, her voice breaking through the tension. The officer who had been laughing only moments earlier froze in his chair. His smirk vanished, as if wiped away by the sheer presence of the woman now standing in front of him. He blinked twice, his laughter stuck in his throat. The same officer who thought the girl was telling a silly story now found himself staring at living proof. Sergeant Naomi Carter, decorated Special Forces operative, knelt beside her daughter, wrapping her arms around her in a brief but firm embrace. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly, her voice laced with both warmth and strength. Alyssa nodded quickly, relief flooding her face. "I told her you were coming," she whispered. Naomi stood back up, her gaze now fixed on the officer who had mocked her daughter. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of her stare. Her eyes, dark and unwavering, locked onto his with the intensity of someone used to commanding respect on battlefields, not begging for it in police stations. The officer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his cheeks reddening. I didn't mean anything by it, he stammered, scratching the back of his neck. Naomi didn't blink. You laughed at my daughter, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. She came here for help, and you made her feel small. Silence filled the station. Even the faint buzz of the overhead lights seemed to fade away. Other officers stood still, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Naomi's tone remained calm, but there was an undeniable edge of authority. My daughter is braver than most people you'll ever meet. She walked in here alone because I taught her to trust the people who wear this uniform. And you laughed. The officer's throat went dry. He had no witty comeback, no sarcastic remark this time. He knew he had crossed a line, and before he could even form an apology, Naomi stepped closer, her boots echoing with every step. The atmosphere shifted. What started as a joke was now becoming deadly serious. The officer's chair creaked as he shifted uncomfortably, trying to avoid the piercing stare of Sergeant Naomi Carter. His earlier laughter now felt like a lifetime ago, replaced by a growing pit of regret in his stomach. Around the room, the other officers exchanged uncertain glances. No one dared to interrupt. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice low but commanding. Do you think this is a game? Do you think serving in the Special Forces is something to laugh at? The officer swallowed hard. I didn't know she was telling the truth, he muttered, his bravado gone. Naomi's eyes narrowed. And that makes it acceptable. A child comes to you for help, and your first response is to mock her? What if she had been in real danger? What if she needed protection right away? The question hung in the air like a heavy weight. The officer had no answer. Alyssa stood quietly by her mother's side, her small hand resting against Naomi's leg. She looked up at her mom with admiration, knowing this was the strength she had always looked up to. This was why she believed so strongly in her mom's words, because Naomi never allowed anyone to be dismissed, not even a child. Another officer, older and more level-headed, stepped forward hesitantly. Sergeant Carter, I think what Officer Miller meant was. Naomi cut him off with a raised hand. Her gaze never left the man who had laughed. He doesn't need anyone to explain for him. He needs to understand the weight of his actions. Respect isn't optional in this line of work, it's the foundation. Without it, this uniform means nothing. The room grew still again. The words sank deep, and even officers who hadn't been involved stood straighter, feeling the gravity of her statement. Finally, Officer Miller, the man who had laughed, spoke again, his voice quieter than before. You're right, he admitted, his shoulders slumping. I shouldn't have done that. I wasn't thinking. Naomi tilted her head slightly, studying him. Her tone softened, but only just. No, you weren't. But next time you encounter a child who's scared and looking for help, I expect you to remember this moment. Because the way you treat people, especially the ones who can't defend themselves, defines the kind of officer you truly are. Her words cut sharper than any punishment could. Miller nodded, shame flickering across his face. He realized that in just a few minutes, this woman had stripped away his arrogance and left him face to face with the kind of officer he should have been all along. And for Alyssa, standing there beside her mother, it was proof that her belief had been right all along. Her mom wasn't just strong in the field, she was strong everywhere. The station had fallen into complete silence. Even the hum of the computers and the ringing of distant phones seemed to fade into the background. Every officer present had their eyes on Naomi Carter. It wasn't just about Officer Miller anymore. It was about all of them. Naomi straightened her posture, her military vest catching the light as she slowly scanned the room. I want every one of you to think about why you put on that badge, she began, her voice carrying like a drill instructor's, but with the clarity of someone who genuinely cared about the answer. Was it for power? To sit behind a desk and laugh at those who come seeking help? Or was it because you wanted to serve, to protect, to be someone the community can trust? Her words cut deep. A few officers looked away, unable to meet her gaze, while others stood frozen, taking in every syllable. You see, in the Special Forces, we're trained to never underestimate anyone. Not a soldier, not a civilian, and certainly not a child. Every person who comes to us deserves to be treated with dignity, because you never know the battles they're fighting. Alyssa looked up at her mom, her chest swelling with pride. She could see that her mother wasn't just teaching the officer a lesson. She was teaching the entire room. Naomi pointed to her daughter. This girl came here because she trusted you. She believed you would take her seriously. And instead, you laughed. Do you know how much courage it took for her to walk through those doors alone? Do you understand how fragile trust can be? One careless moment can shatter it forever. One of the younger officers, barely out of academy training, raised his voice hesitantly. Sergeant, you're right. We forget sometimes. We see so much crime, so many reports, we forget the human side of it. Naomi nodded, her sternness softening slightly. Then don't forget again, because the day you forget, you stop being an officer. And the people you're meant to protect will pay the price. The lesson lingered in the air like a solemn oath. Naomi hadn't raised her voice, but her words struck harder than any lecture ever could. For the first time in years, the officers in that room felt the weight of their duty, not as a job, but as a responsibility. After what felt like an eternity, Officer Miller finally stood from his chair. His face was red with shame, but there was something new in his eyes, humility. He cleared his throat and looked directly at Alyssa. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I shouldn't have laughed at you. You were braver than I gave you credit for. I hope one day I can earn back that trust. Alyssa blinked, surprised at his sudden change of tone. She gave a small nod, her voice steady. Thank you. I just wanted you to believe me. Naomi placed a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder, then addressed the room one final time. Respect isn't given because of a uniform. It's earned through actions. Every single day, remember that the next time someone walks through those doors, you have the power to either lift them up or break them down. Her words hung in the air like a vow. Slowly, the officers nodded one by one. It wasn't just acknowledgement, it was agreement. They understood that something had shifted in that station tonight. Alyssa leaned closer to her mom and whispered, You showed them, didn't you? Naomi smiled faintly, bending down to kiss her daughter's forehead. No, sweetheart. We showed them. You stood up for yourself first. I just backed you up. That simple truth made Alyssa's heart swell with pride. For the first time, she realized that her courage mattered just as much as her mom's strength. As they turned to leave, the same heavy doors that had opened with authority now closed behind them with quiet finality. But inside, the atmosphere of the station was forever changed. The officers didn't just see a little girl and her mother anymore. They saw a powerful reminder of what it meant to wear a badge. Officer Miller sank back into his chair, reflecting on what had happened. He wasn't proud of his behavior, but he knew it had taught him a lesson he would never forget. And the rest of the station silently agreed. This was a night they'd carry with them for the rest of their careers. Outside, Alyssa walked beside her mother under the streetlights, her pink hoodie glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked up at Naomi with admiration. Mom, you really are my hero. Naomi smiled, her arm wrapping protectively around her daughter. And you're mine, she replied softly, because in that moment, it wasn't just a special forces soldier and her daughter walking home. It was proof that courage, no matter how small or how young, can change even the hardest of hearts.